Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 753 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, and today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And given that this is Thursday's episode and the Rangers have a heavyweight matchup tonight against the Boston Bruins, I think it only makes sense for us to actually spend the duration of today's show talking about that very matchup. We don't usually do this where we dedicate an entire episode to previewing the upcoming game. Usually I'll just kind of mention the matchup toward the end of the episode, and we'll talk about some other things earlier. And then after the game happens, obviously we'll spend the next episode talking about, everything that happened in the game. But given the fact that this is Rangers-Bruins, that the Bruins are off to such a strong start this season and certainly seem to be a dangerous team heading toward the Stanley Cup playoffs, I thought it only made sense for us to, kind of do a deep dive here on Rangers versus Bruins, talk about some key matchups, talk about some things that the Rangers are going to have to do if they are going to have any chance of beating this team that is in first place in the NHL and basically in first place in just about every relevant stat, or at least very close to first place. But we're going to talk about all that. We're also going to talk about the Rangers and Bruins, their previous matchup, which happened on November 3rd at Madison Square Garden. This game will also be at Madison Square Garden. And also going to talk about a transaction that the Rangers made just a short time ago, and we will discuss the status of Chris Kreider and whether or not he should be expected to return to this game here. And like I said, we're going to do what we can here to cover this upcoming game at just about every angle. But one thing I want to point out quickly here is just how strange the Rangers' schedule is right now. They had the back-to-back against the Canadiens and the Jackets on Sunday and Monday, respectively. Then they have 2 days off before playing the Bruins on Thursday. Then 3 days off before playing the Panthers on Monday. That game against the Panthers will be the start of the Rangers playing 3 games in 5 days. You got home against Panthers, you've got at Maple Leafs, and you got home against the Golden Knights. Then the Rangers are off for 9 straight days. And of course, that 9-day break has a lot to do with the All-Star break. Everybody gets a couple of days off, and we enjoy the All-Star festivities as hockey fans, and, that's always a good time. But, the All-Star break only runs from February 2nd to February 5th, so it really doesn't explain why the Rangers have so many days in a row off, 9 to be exact. And, there's a 4-game stretch there, or a 4-day stretch there, where the NHL is in action. It's before the All-Star break happens, but the Rangers don't play on any of those 4 days. So just kind of strange, but, obviously the Rangers will roll with the punches, and so will we here. Just wanted to kind of point out the strange nature of the Rangers' schedule that they're currently in right now, this leg of their schedule. Also, a quick programming note. I'm recording this on Tuesday. The Bruins will be in action on Wednesday at the Islanders. So the hope there is that maybe the Bruins, when they play the Rangers, won't be at their best playing in the second game of a back-to-back. Obviously, that's not something that you can really count on when it comes to your opponent, but hopefully that's the case. Hopefully they're just a half step slow for the game against the Rangers. But as far as what the Rangers are up against here, once again, as of this recording, and it is Tuesday as I'm doing this episode here, the Bruins have a record of 34-5-4, and it's even more insane when you say that out loud. It's one thing when I'm doing my notes here and preparing for the episode and everything, you say that out loud and it's like, my God, that is just an insane start to the season. Even if you combine the regulation losses with the overtime losses, they're winning nearly 80% of their games. It's pretty crazy. They've got a league high 166 goals scored. They've given up a league low 94 goals. So naturally, that means they have the best goal differential as well at plus 72. And the next best goal differential in the NHL belongs to the Devils, who are a plus 40. So the Bruins are 32 points ahead of the second-place team in that department. As far as what they've done lately, the Bruins are 11-1-2 in their last 14 games. And remember, none of these stats are going to include Wednesday's game between the Bruins and the Islanders. It's just, with my schedule, it makes more sense to record it here today. So, we'll see what happens in that game too. But regardless, obviously, this team is on fire lately. But the Rangers are rolling themselves. They're not going to be the only hot team on the ice, are the Bruins, when they take on the Rangers at Madison Square Garden. Since the infamous Jacob Trouba helmet throw, the Rangers have gone 14-3-2. So, I mean, they're rolling, and they've basically improved at just about every aspect of hockey since that happened. Guys are just more engaged in the game, and there's a sense of urgency, and most players up and down the roster playing quite a bit better. K'Andre Miller comes to mind. Jacob Trouba, he comes to mind a little bit as well. You're getting some secondary scoring from guys like Philip Hedl, Julien Gauthier before he got hurt. Ben Harper has done a nice job, filling in as that sixth defenseman. Braden Schneider is taking his game to new heights. Panarin looks more engaged. Kakko has played better. Mika and Kreider look more engaged. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Igor Shesterkin, of course, he's really rounding into form here. So the Rangers are basically on fire in their own right, and so are the Bruins, so this should make for a heck of a matchup. But I want to get into a couple of league rankings here for each team, because this is where, it really stands out as far as the Bruins are concerned, and why they've been, or at least partially, why they've been as good as they've been so far this season. The Bruins so far this year, and keep in mind, we are past the halfway point, so all these stats certainly hold water by now. It's not like we're 10 games into the season or anything like that. But the Bruins, they have the number 2 power play in the NHL with a success rate of 25.9%. They also have the number 1 penalty kill in the NHL at 88.2%. They're the second best team on the faceoff circle at 56%. By comparison, the Rangers are good in most of these departments, but not elite. The Rangers now number 15 in the league in power play efficiency at 22.1%, which, that's kind of interesting too, and I think somebody pointed this out in the YouTube section. So the Bruins are number 2 in power play, the Rangers are number 15. The Bruins succeed 25.9% of the time, the Rangers succeed 22.1% of the time. So, I mean, from number 2 to number 15, it's less than a 4% difference, but, I think when you magnify that across an 82 game regular season, you do kind of feel that, and again, it's not always just the success rate. The Rangers recently just don't look dangerous enough on the power play. I thought this most recent game against Columbus, despite them going just 1 for 5, was something of a step in the right direction. They just looked a little bit better, and of course, they scored the 1 power play goal. But just interesting to note that from number 2 in the league in power play to number 15, it's a difference of, like I said, just 3.8%, if we want to be exact, a little bit below 4%. But then the Rangers in the penalty kill, success rate of 80.5%. And the Rangers are number 21 in the league on the faceoff circle at 49%. We will see if they can get their head above water there and, finish better than 50% for the first time in 200 years or however long it's been here. I think it's about 15 years, but yeah, you get the idea. We will go ahead, keep everything rolling in just a second. I definitely want to talk about, the earlier matchup between the Rangers and the Bruins this year. The Bruins won that game 5-2 in Madison Square Garden behind a big third period. Also going to talk about some keys to victory for the Rangers if they are to avenge that earlier loss that they had against the Bruins this season. And we're going to do all that good stuff in just a second. But first, I just want to let everybody know today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number 1 source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league. From pro football to the NHL to basketball and the upcoming MLB season, we've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, we just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. And as promised, I want to go ahead and discuss, at least for a couple of minutes here, the last meeting between the Bruins and the Rangers, which occurred at Madison Square Garden on November 3rd. The Rangers lost that one 5-2, and at first glance, you probably think that's back when the Rangers were scuffling a little bit. Probably was a runaway win for the Bruins. Not really. This game was tied as late as about midway through the third period, or, I actually have the box score open here. I can tell you exactly when the Bruins took what turned out to be then a game-long lead there, if my laptop feels like cooperating. Yeah, so Trent Frederick got the game-winning goal for the Bruins, 6:04 into the third period. To that point, it had been tied. The Rangers were down 1-0 in the first period. They tied the game about midway through the second period on a goal by Jimmy Vesey, his first goal of the season. Charlie Coyle gives the Bruins a lead at 2-1 in the third period. Adam Fox comes back less than a minute later, ties the game. Kakko to Kreider to Fox, ties the game at 2. But then the Bruins down the stretch 6:04 into the third period, the aforementioned Trent Frederic goal. 10:19 into the third, Jake DeBrusk scores to make it 4-2, and then Hampus Lindholm with just 58 seconds remaining gets the empty netter and pretty much seals the deal. Capo Caco with 2 assists in this game as well. As far as some other noteworthy stats from this game, nobody really had any luck on the power play. The Bruins went 0 for 3. The Rangers went 0 for 2. The Bruins outshot the Rangers by a 37-20 clip, and the Bruins won 61% of the faceoffs. The Rangers did out-hit the Bruins 39-21, so they kind of, if nothing else, out-muscled a team that used to try to bully the Rangers a little bit, and the Rangers have done a better job kind of standing up for themselves, probably starting last season and coming into this season as well. And this was kind of a nasty game between these two teams. We got some fisticuffs. Braden Schneider with a big hit, and then he is jumped by A.J. Greer. This is about midway through the second period, so right at the halfway point of the game, both Greer and Schneider got 5 for fighting. Greer also got a 2-minute instigator penalty and a 10-minute misconduct. And at the same time, we also had Barclay Goodrow and Trent Frederic dropping the gloves. So all this happening once again midway through the second period, and not very surprising. This rivalry has very gradually but very steadily gotten nastier and nastier over the past handful of seasons. I think we all remember the stuff with Marchand and Panarin, and Panarin throwing his glove at him. But just in general, when the Rangers were going through the rebuild, I noticed this with the Bruins more so than any other team in the NHL. As far as when they were playing the Rangers, the Bruins would always try to kind of punk out the Rangers and kind of bully them a little bit, try to intimidate them, and it hasn't been working in recent seasons because the Rangers have kind of grown up a little bit. Obviously, they had Ryan Reeves watching their back for last season, and some other guys that are more physical and guys that are willing to fight on the team now than probably they had 2 years ago. And I think the Bruins have been frustrated by that. They've kind of lost that edge. That's not to say the Bruins can't beat the Rangers. They obviously can, but they're not going to dominate them as far as the mental side of the game and as far as like intimidation or anything like that. And I get the feeling that probably bothers the Boston Bruins. Just kind of a hunch there. But yeah, I mean, like I said, these games tend to get nasty, and I don't think it's going to be a surprise at all if we see more fisticuffs, more pushing and shoving after the play, whatever it might be. The Rangers recently, these last handful of games here, there hasn't really been too much of that, but Rangers Bruins, it's a powder keg right now. It just needs a spark to go off, and probably handful of minutes into the first period, maybe 7-8 minutes into the first, we'll see something happen. And, I'm not advocating senseless violence. I'm not saying the Rangers should go out there and look to attack them, but you got to be ready for that kind of a game. It probably going to get nasty between these two teams because it typically does when the Rangers are playing the Bruins in recent seasons here. And I definitely want to go ahead and turn our attention to some keys to victory for the New York Rangers in this game. And, we're going to do that and a whole bunch of other stuff in just a second. But first, just want to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Bilt Bar. Looking for a delicious treat, but don't want all the fat and calories? Then you got to try a Bilt Bar. What makes Bilt Bars so good? Well, for starters, they are covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievably delicious flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. I'm not sure how Bilt does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is that they are healthy. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Bilt Bars at Bilt.com. Now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Bilt Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. If you're close to a Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter, and churro. You can thank us later. All right, and to just kind of keep things rolling here, I want to talk about what the Rangers are going to have to do if they're going to have a chance to knock off this Boston Bruins team, which obviously, once again, has had just an unbelievable start to the season. For starters, let's get Madison Square Garden absolutely rocking for this game. I want playoff-type intensity. As we already mentioned, the Rangers right now have that weird schedule. They've had 2 days off going into this game here, and they'll have 3 days off right after this game against the Bruins. So I think the Garden crowd really needs to bring it, really needs to kind of light a fire under the Rangers. The Rangers have obviously been playing well once again since the Jacob Trouba helmet throw, but man, I want like a whole other level. I want to see them at the best of their abilities for this game. There is no reason for that crowd not to be rocking when you consider that it's Rangers Bruins, which is always rivalry in any sport, and where emotions are always going to run high. And as for the players, there's no reason really to not empty the tank. They should be good and rested by the time this game rolls around on Thursday night. They've had the last 2 days off, or, practicing, of course, but no games. You know what I mean. No games in the last 2 days. And then they'll have 3 days with no games immediately after this one. So there's no reason to not go just completely, pedal to the metal, step on the gas, leave everything on the ice type of a performance for the New York Rangers. And if that's not enough to get it done, well, at least you gave it everything you had. At least you took advantage of the schedule that you've been dealt right now. The Bruins, once again, on the second game of a back-to-back. The Rangers, this is the only game that the Rangers will play during a 6-day span, which started on Tuesday the 17th and will end on Sunday the 22nd. This is the only game in that time frame there. So I want to see that mentality from the Rangers. We need to win this game. I want to see that mentality from the fans. We need to win this game. Statement victory for the Rangers. So, I want to see these guys skating their tails off, contesting everything, physical play, willing to mix it up. We talked about that earlier, but, again, the Bruins have guys like Marchand and Pastrnak and Frederick, and you get the feeling sooner or later some of these guys are going to act up, and once again, the Rangers need to be ready for it. As far as some more tangible things, though, I've been talking about this on and off over the last handful of games, and of course, the Rangers have played well recently, but one thing I would like to see more of, especially on the power play, but even at even strength as well, is just seeing more traffic, more chaos in front of the opposing team's net. There's been too many times recently where I feel like the opposing goaltender just isn't under enough pressure, just isn't under enough stress, gets a lot of clean looks at the puck. I want to see a little bit more traffic, a little bit more havoc right there in the goalie crease, and hopefully Chris Kreider can bring that to the table. It sounds like he is probably going to play in this game against the Bruins, and we'll talk about Kreider in just a little bit here. But, I think the fact that the Rangers need more chaos, more havoc in front of the net. That's especially true when you consider the fact that the Bruins have two very, very, very good goalies. Ullmark right now, and it's hard to say which goalie we're going to get because, again, the Bruins are playing the back-to-back, and, we'll see if one goalie gets one game, one goalie gets the other. But Ullmark right now, the best goals against average in hockey at 1.92, the best save percentage in hockey at 9.36. Swayman is number 7 in goals against average at 235. So either way, Rangers got to be up against a very capable goalie. I suppose if I'm being completely honest here, and I understand be careful what you wish for, but, just going by the numbers and what they've done so far this season, Swayman, you would think the Rangers would have a better chance to beat him than Ullmark. But you know what? Who cares about that? Give me Ullmark. Let's go up against Ullmark. I know be careful what you wish for, again. But, yeah, let's see the Bruins at full bore and at full strength. And if the Rangers win this game, I don't want any Bruins fans to be saying, well, you beat our backup goalie, blah, 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 blah. So, you know what? Bring on Linus Ullmark. Let's see what he can do, and let's see him go up against Igor Shesterkin. And as for the Rangers, we pretty much know for a fact that it's going to be Igor Shesterkin. Obviously, it's a heavyweight matchup. Yaroslav Halak playing the most recent game, and it's going to be Igor out there back between the pipes for the Rangers. And Igor, as I mentioned, has been getting better and better as this season has progressed. He went through some early season hiccups, but in his last 14 games, Igor has allowed 2 goals or fewer in 7 of them. So that's a pretty impressive stretch. And this would be a great game to run that streak to 8 out of 15 games. I get the feeling if the Rangers are going to win, going to need a big performance from Igor. Going to have to eke out like a 2-1 win, a 3-2 win, something along those lines. We shall see. One other stat about Igor, too. In that same 14-game stretch that he's had, he has allowed more than 3 goals only 1 time. So Igor obviously playing a lot better for this team. Maybe not quite at last year's insane video game-like level, but still very, very good. As far as some key matchups here, I think you look at the Bruins and you look at who's dangerous and who's a threat every single game. You have to start with the perfection line. They've recently, at least according to a couple of depth charts that I've seen, they've had Pastrnak off of the top line. He's been on the second line with Zaka and with Krejci, and they've had Craig Smith on the top line with Marchand and Bergeron. But, they're all out there on the power play together, that being Marchand, Bergeron, and Pastrnak. And I think if they're in a situation where they're down by a goal, I could easily see them going back to that trio. We will see. But, containing that line is going to be much easier said than done. But I will say, despite the Rangers losing 5-2 against the Bruins, that's another thing. If you just hear that score and, you try to envision or imagine how that game went, you probably think like, well, the big three for the Bruins, they probably just absolutely went off in that game. Was not the case. Between Bergeron, Marchand, and Pastrnak in that previous meeting between the Rangers and Bruins, the Bruins got just one goal from Pastrnak, but that was the only point as far as those three players combined. It was some secondary scores that actually got the Rangers. But you got to figure that line for the Bruins, if they are reunited, and even if not, even if they have just 2 out of the 3 on the top line, that line will be going up against the line of Kreider, Mika, and Kakko, once again assuming that Chris Kreider is going to play in this game. But that's especially true because the Rangers get the last change, and I think of all the Ranger lines, that's probably the one you'd want to match up against the Bruins top line. Maybe the Ranger... I was going to say the Ranger third line, but now Krasov is on the third line, so you don't really see him as a defensive specialist. I think for sure you'll see the Rangers try to counter that line with Kreider and Mika and Kakko as much as possible, and hopefully some Adam Fox and Ryan Lindgren out there against that line as well. You get the feeling that certainly Ryan Lindgren and Brad Marchand are going to find each other. They always do. We know Marchand won't drop the gloves, but that's beside the point. Bottom line, you got to imagine the Ranger top defensive pairing and the top line will be out there to deal with the biggest threats on the Boston Bruins. And just as a quick aside here, I got to ask you guys a question here. Is there a more nauseating nickname in the history of sports than the perfection line? Like, I can't really think of any. One that's kind of a low-key terrible nickname, and it's also a Boston player, is Big Papi. I've always thought that was just awful. I got to mention, to be fair here, we'll throw a New York nickname in there as well. So John Sterling obviously does a fantastic job. Everybody loves John Sterling. But he used to call Derek Jeter El Capitan, which I thought was just awful. Clearly not John Sterling's best work there. But I can't really look at that as an official nickname for Derek Jeter because I don't think another human being on this planet ever called Derek Jeter El Capitan other than John Sterling. And again, John Sterling's the man. He's done a great job for the Yankees over the years. But not his best work there for sure. But just wanted to throw that out there. I think the most nauseating nickname in the history of sports is the perfection line. But if you guys have some others in mind besides the perfection line or Big Papi or El Capitan, throw it in the comments section on YouTube or email me with a couple. There's probably a few that I'm forgetting here off the top of my head. But yeah, even saying that out loud, I don't like it. It's a brutal nickname. But anyway, I think another key matchup in this game, bringing things back to the actual matchup here, the Ranger power play. They've got their work cut out for them against this Boston penalty kill unit. As we already mentioned, Boston has succeeded at an 88% rate so far this season while on the kill. And, the Rangers with their power play, they've scuffled a little bit recently. And again, tough matchup, but they got to find a way to get at least one in this game. I think goals are going to be at a premium against this Bruins team that is so tough defensively. The Rangers will get a boost, presumably with Kreider being back in the mix. And, you got to figure he'll be right back out there on the top power play unit in his usual spot as a net front presence. And you hope that this could be the kind of game where Kreider comes through with a deflection or a dirty goal, cleaning up some loose change in the crease there. The Rangers have certainly been missing Chris Kreider over these past 3 games that he's missed, but perhaps in no one area any greater than the power play. And I know that the power play was struggling a little bit with Kreider even in the lineup, but, a struggling power play doesn't need to lose one of its biggest threats on the ice. That's not a recipe for success at all. I also want to mention just the home and away splits for these two teams. It's interesting because the Rangers this year have actually been better on the road than they have been at home. At Madison Square Garden, the Rangers are 11-8-4, so under 500 if you combine all the losses. On the road, though, 14-5-3, so the Rangers have been road warriors this season. The Bruins at home, they are 21-1-3. So we are more than halfway through the season. The Bruins have lost a grand total of 1 game in regulation at home, which is pretty crazy. On the road, slightly less insane record for the Bruins on the road at 13-4-1. So they're at least somewhat beatable when they go on the road, but just wanted to throw that out there and just kind of, mention the fact that the Rangers have actually been a better road team on the road, or a better team on the road than they have been at home. And again, if we're 10, 15 games into the season, I wouldn't think much of that, but we're past the halfway point here, so I do think stats like that begin to hold water, certainly at this point in the season. One other thing that I want to mention here, though, I've been talking about Chris Kreider kind of on and off through the whole episode. Ryan Carpenter was sent back down to the Hartford Wolfpack. He had recently been promoted to the Rangers, spent, I want to say, the last 2 games as a healthy scratch, never got back into the lineup, obviously played for the Rangers a little bit earlier in the season, got placed on waivers, got sent back down to the Hartford Wolfpack. But with the Rangers sending Carpenter down They didn't call anybody up, so that tells me that they're going to roll with 22 players for the foreseeable future, and it probably also means that, once again, Chris Kreider will be available for this game. If they don't have Carpenter or any other forwards sticking around, then that would leave them with just 12 forwards if Chris Kreider was not healthy. So I would imagine Kreider gets back into the lineup, probably slots right back in there on the first line. He'll be out there with Mika and Kakko, you would have to think. Also, he'll be back out there on the top power play unit. Lafreniere didn't really do anything to, claim that spot on the top line. And honestly, even if Lafreniere had played very well, I get the feeling the Rangers probably would have gone back to Kreider on that top line spot. I just think there's a trust there. And obviously, Kreider's having another very nice season for himself. So I think for sure, if Kreider's in the lineup, which all signs seem to point that he will be, he'll be out there with Mika and with Kakko. I think the second line probably stays the same of what we've seen in the past game and a half here. Panarin, Trocheck, and Vesey from left to right. And then the third line, I think you're probably looking from left to right, Lafreniere, Hedl, and Kravtsov. So sort of a modified kid line, I guess you could say. It's not the kid line because Kakko's up there with Mika and Kreider now, but Kravtsov's very young, and obviously we could still call that the kid line 2.0, something along those lines. And then for the fourth line, and this is where it kind of gets interesting as far as who's the odd man out with Chris Kreider being back into the lineup. My prediction is that they will go from left to right, Sammy Blais, Barclay Goodrow, Johnny Brodzinski, and Lecision will be the odd man out. Goodrow's obviously going to be there. It's just kind of a matter of which position he plays on the fourth line. The fourth line, I thought, had a pretty good game in this most recent, contest against the Blue Jackets. So I would imagine, Brodzinski had a couple of scoring opportunities. I think maybe that buys him another game. Probably should have drawn a penalty. It just was not called. Sammy Blais looked okay in the most recent game, and Lecision just got here. I get the feeling he's probably going to be the odd man out. He drew a penalty in the last game, but in his 2 games here, I don't think he's done anything to really distinguish himself enough to, really, claim a spot in the lineup on a nightly basis. But it's anybody's guess, really. I mean, you could make a case for Lecision still being out there, take Brodzinski out, take Blais out. I know a lot of Ranger fans will probably be crowing for Sammy Blais to be out of the lineup, and certainly the case could be made there. But if I had to take a stab at it here, I would say Lecision will be the odd man out for the Rangers in this game against the Bruins. That will pretty much do it for today, though, guys. We got one more episode this week, and that will be Friday's episode, where we talk about whatever happens between the Rangers and the Bruins on Thursday. So, once again, if you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that is @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. This episode, like several others, has debuted, or if you're watching this live during its debut, on YouTube, it is debuting earlier than the audio version. So you definitely will subscribe to YouTube. There's a couple of things that only go on YouTube as well. They don't, necessarily make their way into episodes. So please do subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. But that will do it for today, guys. Once again, thanks so much for tuning in, and I will see you next time.